Hi, welcome to Binary Automation. So in this tutorial, we'll see how we can send a post request using the HTTP client class. So we'll basically using a method called send async. This is the most common and the most generic method that everyone uses, since we can send any kind of HTTP method, right? Like your post, put, delete, right? And along with that, we'll also look at what are the different headers, how we can pass headers, and how we can send headers in terms of the key value pairs, and get the headers in the response as well. Yeah, so let's get started. So I have a sample post request with me. So basically this is the request, or this is the URL that I have, and if you see the sample JSON payload, it has ID, quantity, price, and if you see the response, it's a very simple response: success is equal to true. And if you see the headers that we have, the response headers, we have date, content type, content length, connection, set cookies, and there are a lot more headers there, right? So let's see how this can be done, right? So at first, I'll be writing a classic vanilla code within our main function. I'll be writing the entire code, but you can just take bits and bytes and put it in a method and parameterize it. But for simplicity, I'll just write this in the main method. Yeah. So first, I'll just initialize some of our HTTP client class. And we'll also be needing a HTTP request message, and HTTP response message. So all this comes under the same package, right? Class system.net.http.http client, right? So all are under the .net. Now let's also create a variable for a string called response body. Now let's begin by creating the object of the HTTP client class. Yeah. And also create the object of the HTTP request message. So basically, request is equal to new HTTP request message. So if I show you the documentation or the official documentation of the HTTP request message, it basically requires two values here, right? One is what is the HTTP method you want to pass, basically put, post, delete, and then what is the URI, basically what URI you are testing, right? The endpoint that you're trying to test. So let me just give the HTTP method as post, and the URI that I'm trying to test is, let's get the URI. We need to also have the JSON request payload sent along with the post message, right? So in order to do that, we are creating a data model actually. So basically I have a class called data send, and within that I've initialized three properties here: ID, quantity, and price. So if you look at the sample JSON, right, it has ID, quantity, and price. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. So we need to serialize our data now, right, in order to construct and send that within the as part of the send async, right? So let me just use the JSON convert, okay, and JSON convert dot serialize. So I have to import this newtons of JSON, right? So basically this is the a NuGet package that I've added, and basically you have to use that to serialize your data. New the class is data send, yeah, new data send, right? So basically your ID can give some value here. ID is 156, your quantity is 1, and your price is like 15. Yeah. when we have the data in certain string formats, we need to convert that into HTTP content in order to send that with as part of the send async method or the post async method, right? So let's wrap it up now. Wrap it within the string content. Word data string content equal to new string content. So the data that I have to pass here is, yeah, but before that I have to just put this, I have to initialize the string, the one that was just serialized, right? So let me just put this in the string content, and along with that you can initialize your string content with certain additional values, right? For example, if you want the encoding here, right, and what kind of whether we are sending it in terms of XML or JSON, right? So let me just add this as the encoding will be encoding dot UTF-8. I mean, according to your projects you can have the relevant encoding, right? So encoding dot UTF-8, and I can pass like application slash JSON. Okay, hope that makes sense now. Since we have constructed our JSON payload, a request payload, now we need to just attach that to our HTTP request message. Yeah, so the way you do is HTTP, so basically the request that you have just created here, request dot content equal to string content. Yeah, so basically you're just passing that string content to your request dot content. Yeah, so now let's start now by adding the headers to this request, right? Request content that we have. Let's try adding headers now. So now headers can be added in multiple fashions, right? So you can use, for example, the HTTP client. Like for example, we have the client dot default request headers, and you can just do an add here, right? You can add this in terms of the key value pairs. That's one of the option that you have. There are a couple of other options, but what I prefer, like some of the people who work in the industry, they prefer is they kind of use the headers or add the headers rather in a class which is inbuilt called name value header value class, right? So what it does is that you can add the headers in terms of keys and values, and you can even run a for each on top of that, right? So let's see how it can be done, right? You can even actually have a dictionary initialized and add that, and then later add that to the request dot headers. So let me just show you how it can be done. So I have a list with name value header value, right? So if you see this name value dot header value, so that's exactly what I'm going to use. Okay, so this name value header value comes within the system.net header HTTP headers name value header value. So if I show you the official documentation for this, right, basically represents a name value pair used in the various headers, right? So if you see the two properties that we get for this, name and value, right? So you can just retrieve it by saying, the name value dot like name and the value, so you will get those relevant details. So let's see how we can add certain headers, right? So if, for example, let's rename this as list headers, yeah, for simplicity, and we'll have so let's add this list headers, yeah, whatever, list headers dot add. Okay, we get an add method here. So if you see, we can actually create this object of the new name value, and we can pass the headers here. So say the content is like encoding, right? UTF-8, and similarly you can pass multiple such values, right? let me just add another value here as like user agent, and pass it in machine name or something like X machine. Okay, yeah. And so now let's see how we can actually add this to our actual request dot headers, right? So that is basically what we want, right? So I have a let me just write a for each. Okay, and so let me just pass this list headers here and give this as header. So basically within our request dot headers dot add. Okay, so if you see this request dot headers dot add, right, so you'll be able to add the headers in terms of your key value, right? So the header dot value, header dot name, and header dot value. Basically what we're doing is we are just looping this the list here, and then just adding this in terms of in terms of header dot name and header dot value. So your request dot headers is now initialized with your headers, right? So that's really cool, right? We have the headers, and now we have the content, right? Your request content. Now if you want to send this as part of the send async, it's so all you have to do is client dot send async, and what you can do is you can send the request here, and this will actually give you a response. So let me just show you what the send async requires, right? Send async requires an HTTP request message. So that's exactly what we are sending. And the error that you're seeing now is because we have to wrap this with the await and async model, right? So since we are writing in an asynchronous way, we need to wrap this in the await and async method, right? So I've already added the async here and the task, right? So let's just proceed ahead, right? So now we've got the response. Now let's have this response body in read it as a string, right? So await response dot content dot read a string, right? So what this does is it will give you it'll just give back the whole thing in the string, right? And then you can do whatever you want with the string, right? You can, for example, now let's just print this. Okay, now once we send this, let's do another thing, the additional part that we want to do, right? We'll also see how we can get the headers from the response, and how the headers are going to be, right? But before that, let's just run it once and see how the whole response looks like. Yeah. Okay, great, right? We've got success as true, and that is exactly what we wanted, right? So let's just run this in terms of how we can get the headers in the response as well. Yeah. So we'll be writing a for each loop now. Okay. For each var item, say in response dot headers. Yeah. So it's exactly very similar to what we have done earlier, right? So basically when we wanted to add something, we added that in the request dot headers. So if you see this request dot headers, we just added that, and the same thing applies to your response message. So if you want to retrieve what are the headers and you want to assert something, you can just do a response dot headers and just retrieve the values, right? So now for example, I want to display or I want to print the values. What I can do is write line. I can say that key is okay, item dot key, right? And let me just append this and add the remaining part of what the value would be, right? The value is item dot value. Now I'll just show this part here why are we using this first or default or thing, right? So if you see this carefully, what does response.headers return, right? Now response.header basically gets the collection of the HTTP response headers. Okay, now what does it actually return? The HTTP response headers, right? So let me just show you this. Now what kind of error it will throw? See this: cannot convert type system collections generic key value pair in terms of string. So here your string is nothing but your header name, okay, and the value is in terms of enumerable string, right? So basically you will have a string. It's kind of a string wherein you can loop through the string, right? You can have like string separated, it's like a string. You can have string arrays, or you can actually enumerate on top of that, right? So let's just put this back as var item, and that's the reason we are doing this, right? So if you see the item dot value, what it returns I enumerable string, and from there so if you see this first or default, there is an extension method on the string part, and it returns the first element of the sequence or default value if the sequence contains no element. So we have a similar method which is called the first, but the problem with the first is that in case if it is if it is null or blank, it can throw exceptions as well, right? So that's the reason we are using the first or default. Great. So let me just run this for you. Yeah. Right. Great. So if you see this key is date. Let me just add proper spaces here, so it'll be easier to understand. Okay, and run it again. So if you see the key is date value, and that throws the actual value. The key is blah and blah connect value, keep alive, access control, allow origin, value is just a star. The key is CF's cache status value, and the value is dynamic. So you get all the response, right? So now you can take this individual keys or individual values, and you want to do it or you want to save it. Similarly, you can even have the authorization. For example, you've got certain tokenization in the headers, and you want to validate that, right? So you can maybe a bearer token or some other token, and you want to see how it works, right? So this exactly works like that, right? So even in the top one that we saw, right, wherein we were trying to add the headers, request headers, you can actually loop through the headers in the similar fashion that we have done below, right? So all you need to do is over here in terms of response.headers, you'll just do request.headers and you'll just print it. So let me just do that for you as well. If you want to print what was the request headers, right? So request, I'll just say request dot headers, and I'll print this as well for you, right? So let me just run this. Okay, if you see the last two keys, encoding values UTF-8 and user agent is X machine, right? So this is how you can just traverse through your headers, your response headers and your request headers. So hope you like the video. Please comment on what further needs to be talked about or made a video on, and please comment, likes, and please share the video across so that I can gain more visibility. Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah. Hi. In this tutorial, we'll be talking about how we can deserialize complex JSON, right? So in the previous tutorial, we saw how we can send a GET request, get the response, or get a JSON response, and then print it, right? So in this video, we'll see how we can parse, or you can deserialize actually the JSON response, right? So if you see the sample GET request that I have over here of list users, it composes of certain root elements, right? That you have certain root elements, and you have certain key value pairs, which has like JSON, which is like an array, and within that array you have like nested JSON, right? So let's look at how we can deserialize this. So basically, to do this process, we will be using a NuGet package called Newtonsoft JSON library. Okay, so let's add that as the first step. So yeah, if you search in for the Newtonsoft JSON library, right? So here, since I've already installed it, you can see a green tick mark here, right? And in case if you haven't, please do it. So you can just select this and click the install icon here, and it'll install the NuGet package, right? So once we are done installing the NuGet package, we'll see how we can deserialize this. Okay. Now, so before we do, so this is basically in the previous we have already seen how we have done this, right? So basically, this is a HTTP client class. We are just sending a GET request with a specific URI, and we are just getting this in the response body, and we're just printing the response body. So our purpose is now to deserialize and understand how we can get, for example, if you want to get the page, right? If you want to get the IDs of each within this data key, you want to get each IDs, right? So ID 7, ID 8, ID 9, you want to get certain email. So let's see how we can do that. So basically, if you let's just get the URI of this. Okay. And since we have to pass this in the string, we have our get request feature file. Okay, we'll just pass the string. Oh, it's already pasted here. Let me just recheck this if it's okay. So it's already pasted. Okay, and so now we can use the JSON JSON converter. Okay, if you see, there's something called JSON convert, and if you see the package where it's coming from, class newtonsoft.json convert, right? So we'll use this to deserialize our JSON. Okay, and over here, if you have to pass what is the data model here. I'll just come back to that, and what are you actually trying to parse, what are you trying to deserialize. Okay, so we'll just give the response body here for now. Okay, so now it might say that use a generic method requires one type argument. Okay, what is that one type argument? So basically, when you're trying to deserialize your JSON, right, it expects that it needs certain model, okay, a certain class model to map each JSON key or value with certain properties or with certain variables in the class. Okay, so let's see how we can do that. So so basically, let's copy this JSON. Okay, let's copy this JSON again. Oops. Okay, now we have a very cool feature of the Visual Studio, which is called paste, a special paste. So if you go to edit, so let's basically create a class for this specific model. Okay, class, you can write it as like, you can rename this class as data model. Okay, .cs. So let's just make this as public for now. So so one cool feature that I was talking about within the Visual Studio is a special paste. Okay, so if you see the paste JSON as classes. Okay, so how cool is this, right? So we get all the key value pairs, everything which is defined in your JSON response, right? It actually puts that as part of the properties. It wraps it as a properties, right? So if you see our JSON request again, right, you can see that you have page, per page, total pages, data. It's like an this is an array. Within that you have again individual JSONs, right? You have your ID, email, first name, last name, avatar. This is your like index of 0 within this data, right? And then again the next you have is ID 87, right? So this is the second index, right? So and similarly it maps the special data JSON, it maps into individual properties, right? So if you see this, all the and it also understands that since this data is an array, the data type is set to as data array, and it creates a special class for it. Okay, so we'll be using this data model to to deserialize this. Just one change is that we'll be removing this class called the root object class. Okay, because at the root level, whatever pages are there, if you see at the root level, you have page, per page, total pages, and then you just have another one which is called data and support at the end, right? So we just need these at the root level. Okay, so these are all the things that you have at the root level, and then we'll be having two classes, like one is for the data, which is the array, and then you have the support over here. So if you see the support over here at the end, you'll be able to see the support here, right? See, this is another, like, within this support you have like a URL as a key, and then there's a URL here, text, and then the key value pair text, and to keep request free, right? So let's model this up in the JSON convert class. Okay, so now we will give this data model. Okay, see, the error is vanished now. So so now let's print the response that you want, right? You want maybe in this case you want to print what is the value of the page. Okay, so let's assign this something to say var the des data, for example, deserialize data, right? Okay, now you want to print this data dot, say you want to see what the page is. Okay, so for example, in this case, if you see what is the value of the page here, so the key is page, the value is 2. So since you want to print 2, it says argument cannot convert from int to string. Okay, so for now let me just convert this to string. Okay, and let's see how this works. Okay, okay, here you go. So if you see this, it has printed 2 over here. Okay, so I mean just for better understanding, okay, let me just run this again so that it gives more clarity as to what the output is. Yeah, here you go, it's 2, right? So see, in this way we can actually deserialize our the response, the JSON, whatever complex JSON you have, you can actually get the value. So now let's try another one. For example, we have this data here. So in this data, for example, you want to find the IDs of all the all the IDs available, right? So let's try to get that value now. Okay, we'll be writing a for each because it's an array, right? So, and we would ideally want to so if you see this here, where item in des data dot data. Okay, so now if I show you my data model class over here, okay, it clearly sees that this data over here, okay, yeah, this data is clearly an array, right? So that's the reason we are putting this in the for each, right? It'll be easier to just print it if you want to get each IDs or whatever, right? So now in this case, let's just write a print line here, okay, and say you want to get item dot id, okay, item dot id dot to string, yeah, okay. So let's just run this. Great, right? So if you see this, you can see the IDs here: 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So in this manner, any complex JSON you have, you can actually deserialize it, and you can use it for your purpose, right? And if you want to play around with it, like for example in this for each loop, you can write like, if the ID is say 8, print the like print, if the ID is 8, print the first name, print the last name, concatenate it, do whatever you want, right? So you can play around with whatever things you want. You can sum it, you can do whatever you want, right? So I think that's the whole crux of it. So hope you like the video. So if you do like the video, please like, share, comment and subscribe, and please let me know in the comments what else do you want me to cover as part of the series of this API automation. Okay, yeah. Hi, welcome to Binary Automation. So in the previous tutorial, we talked about how we could deserialize your complex JSON into objects, and in this video we'll talk about how you can serialize your objects into JSON, right? So similar to the previous video, we used a NuGet package called Newtonsoft JSON. So we'll be using the same to serialize. So have a sample JSON, right, which looks a bit realistic, to be honest. You have certain key value pairs here, and then you have an address which is an array, and within that you have certain keys and values like code, sector, and then within the same array you have some countries like Belgium and England. So let's see how you can serialize your objects into getting this as an output, right? So let's create a data model for it. Let's have a class like data model, and let's define the properties, okay, the properties which were there as part of the JSON. So we have mentioned address as an array because if you see this address, it's an array, right? So similarly, we'll create another class for code and sector, yeah. Something like postal code, and we'll name this as like you want to give string, integer, whatever, right? Just for the namesake. So code and okay. So we have our data models lined up. Okay. So now what we're going to do is let me create an object of this data model. Say data is equal to new data model. Okay, so let me initialize this. The data model here. Say name equal to, like, you can give anything, Morpheus. and job as leader, and then what you can do is you can initialize the ADDR as well, right? So if you see this ADDR, you have name, job, and address, right? So name, job, and address, right? So that is a new, so since that is an object array, we'll just initialize it. Okay, and let's so we'll basically create an object of this postal code, right? Because we want to have the code and sector within that array, right? So let's write postal code. Okay, let's initialize the code and sector there. So basically the code, you can give the code something like, I don't know, 2 3 4, and the sector as 5 6 7 8, and yeah, so so basically this is how it's going to be, right? So let me just see why there are errors here. Okay, so I think I have renamed this as int, right? So let me put it as string. Okay, here we go. So we have created the data model here, and the modeling is all fine. So let's use the JSON convert dot serialize object, and then you can pass this object here. Okay. Now basically let's put this into certain data serialized, okay, and have this printed to the console. Okay, so I think we are done. So let's just run this and see what is the output that we get. Great. So if you see this sample, let me just open it in a, let's just open it in a pretty format, so just we can see the alignment and the formatting, whether everything looks exactly to the original JSON or not. Okay, so this is exactly the same thing that we wanted originally, right? So if you see this, let me just minimize this. So if you see this, Morpheus, the name, the job, the address, which is an array, and within that code sector. Okay, I think we have forgotten to add like certain fields, right? Country and like say Belgium, and if you want to add anything else here, say England, right? I mean, you can add any number of elements that you want in the array, right? So let me just run it again. Cool. So let me just copy this again and paste it here. Upload data. Cool. So this is exactly what we wanted. And if you compare this with our original right, so if you compare this with our original array, we have got this from our objects, right? So basically this is, in this way you can try to visualize what kind of model you want, and you can just serialize this with the JSON convert, right? So please let me know if you like the video. Please subscribe and comment what else do you want me to cover as part of the series, the next tutorial. So hope you like the video. Thank you. Yeah. Hi, welcome to Binary Automation. So in this lecture we will see what AutoFixture is and what is the purpose of it, right? So this is the GitHub page of AutoFixtures. If you see the definition of this, it basically says that AutoFixture is an open source library for .NET designed to minimize the arrange phase of your unit test in order to maximize maintainability, right? And it also says that its primary focus or goal is to allow developers to focus on what is being tested rather than how to set up the test scenario, right? So basically, generally the developers and the testers, they use those auto fixtures to focus on actually writing the test logic and not focusing on what should be the test data, right? So for example, if you have an API endpoint and you want to test that endpoint, it could be a get call or for example a post call, right? And in your post call you have a request JSON payload with a lot of fields, right? And you don't want to be bothered about what needs to be inputted into that fields. So in that cases you can use you can use auto fixtures wherein it'll just generate certain random value and you can just send the request, right? So let's see how this can be implemented. So in order to get the auto fixtures, right, we need to add a NuGet package called the auto fixtures, right? So if you see this NuGet solution for my project, I already have this auto fixtures installed, right? So so if you want to use this in your project, C# project, you can just install this auto fixtures. Yeah. So let's get started. Okay. So let's start by creating the object of this auto fixtures. Okay, so I've imported this if you see where it is coming from, fixture, it is coming from fixture.fixture, right? So now this is actually instantiating your actually it's creating an object of your auto fixture. Okay, now let's start by actually say creating a random string. Okay, so let's say that string name equal to fixture dot create, right? So we have something called a create method. So if you see what this method does, creates a new specimen based on a request. Okay, so let's say we want to create, we have to also pass the type of it, right? Type T. So in this case we want a string, right? So let's pass a string here. Okay, and let's quickly show you how it's actually generated, right? So let me just say name. Okay, and quickly run this. If you see this, it has printed some random value, right? So how cool is that, right? So in this case you need not be bothered about what kind of data has been generated. You just want some data to be inputted into your fields or in your properties, right? So in a similar way, we can also create user-defined random data, right? So for example, you have a class of type employee, right? And you have a lot of properties in that, and you want to generate certain random values for that, right? So you can do that as well. So as I said just some time back, that you have your API call, you have an API with some request payload, and you want to generate some random values. You can do that using the auto fixtures, right? So let's see how we can define an auto fixture for some user defined data. Okay, so I have a class here called the employee. Okay, and it has 3 properties. Okay, salary, designation, and then I also have a list of a position. Okay, so basically one is int, another is a string type, and third is a list. So let's see how we can generate random data for this. Yeah, so let's again use the same fixture and dot create. Okay, so this time I'll be using the employee here. Okay, I'm giving this employee here as my defined data type. Okay, and let's say I am putting in some value called emp. Okay, now what this holds is the actual object of that employee. Okay, now say you want to print certain values, okay, of the salary and the designation. So okay, so let's see what gets generated here. Okay, so if you see this, the salary here is 164 and the designation is some random value which is generated. So see how great is that, right? So it has generated some random integer value called 164 and then certain random string. So now if you see how the string is generated, it actually appends what the name of the value is. For example, you have a property called designation, and it has actually appended that before the random string, right? So if you have multiple strings and you won't be able to, sometimes it's easier to identify in that case, right? So that's the way how the auto fixtures work. Now in similar way, we had a list, right? So list of string and position. So now you might be wondering how many indexes or how many elements are going to be added in this list, right? So let's check that as well. Yeah, so let's create like a for each. Okay, sorry. Okay, and in this case, let's say employee dot position. Okay, we just want to see how many positions are filled. Okay, and let's print all the items. Okay, and let's just run this. You see this 1 2 3. So auto fixtures actually has filled 3 indexes or 3 elements in that list. So by default, that's the nature of how the auto fixture works. So in case if you have given certain random list, it'll generate 3 elements for you in that list. Okay, and then obviously you can customize that as well. Okay, according to your needs, right? So you can, in a similar way, you can play around the auto fixtures in different manners, and you can create a lot of things with that. And maybe in the next series, when we do the X unit videos, we'll also cover the inline auto data. That's an even more amazing stuff, right? So hope you like the video. Please like, subscribe, and share, and comment as to what more needs to be covered. Yeah, so thank you. Hi, welcome to Binary Automation. So in this lecture, we'll see what is WireMock and what is the purpose of WireMock. So basically, WireMock is used for stubbing your API response, or you can say hard coding or virtualizing your response. So in case if the development has still not been done, and a lot of interfaces and a lot of components have not been developed for a particular API endpoint, and you want to quickly mimic it and see how it looks like, and in case if there's some other dependency and other teams are waiting for your endpoint, and you want to quickly make it up and running, so you can just have this WireMock expose certain endpoints, right? So you can do a lot with it. So basically it is primarily used for stubbing, as I said, right, for virtualizing your API response, right? So let's see how it can be done. So basically, since we are using C# as a language, there is something called WireMock.net, which is the NuGet package. So if you see my NuGet package manager, I have a WireMock.net already installed. Okay, so you need to install it, and then we can actually get we can use different kind of functions of WireMock, right? So let's see how we can do this. So let's start by initializing the WireMock server. Okay, WireMock server dot start. Okay, so this actually starts your WireMock server. Now if you want to see on what URL or what port this actually starts, you can simply do something like server.url, and you should be good, and you will be able to see what is the URL, right? So if you see this, there's an open port called 8154, and that is where the WireMock has started, right? So now let's see how we can actually build a API request and API response. For example, you want certain URL path, and along with that you want to tell what kind of HTTP method it is, whether it's a get call or post call, and what is the specific header you want to pass, and header matching, request matching. So in those instances, you can configure what your request type should be and what your response should be, right? So let's see how we can do it. So basically we have configured the WebMock server, right? So now let's use the same thing. So you have something called server.given here. So if you see this carefully, this server.given is what it returns is an I respond with a provider. Okay, so I'll tell you a bit what this is. Okay, so now we have a request. Okay, now this request is what we will be using to actually configure our the input request, the input like the URL path and the HTTP methods, right? So if we want, so we have to use a package called so we have to import a package. If you see this request, so this is a package wiremock.requestBuilder, right? So this is the package that we have. So now we can use this to create your input behavior, right? So now let me write this, that I want to create a request with the path as something like, say I want something like /home/test, something like this, okay? And then uh, the other detail that I want is I'll be using the get call, okay? So this is basically a get call that I'm trying to do, okay? And once we are done with this, I also want to configure how our response should be, right? So now I can do I can actually say that, okay, so now so I want you to respond with certain manner, right? So if I do the response, so I have to import a package here called response builder. So for request we have the wiremock.request builder, and for response we have the wiremock.response builder, okay? So now this response, so I need it in certain manner, right? So I'll do this create similar to the request, and I will have it used. For example, in the response I want, like, say with status code as 200, okay? So let me just put this whole thing down, okay? It'll be easier for understanding purpose, okay? And then you can pass in your header as well, dot so now this basically header is nothing but your key value pair, right? So you can actually write it in your key value pairs, like what kind of headers you want, okay? So let me just write the content type here. Content type, say text slash plain, something like text slash plain. Now you can actually pass what kind of body you want, okay? So with body, so let me just write it below, okay? With body, so now since we have mentioned this as our text slash plain, so we can actually write certain like a string value or whatever you're expecting in your response, right? So with body something like hello everyone, something like this, okay? And so let's quickly wrap this into, yeah, so now this is it, right? So what you have done is you have said that, hey, I'm creating a request with certain path as home/test, and this is a get call, and respond me with a status code as 200, and then with header as content type as text plain, and with body as hello everyone, okay? So as I told you, we also need to close the server, right? So we have to do that as well. So let me just do that. So server dot stop, okay? Now but before I do that, one thing that I can do is, in order to show you that this is actually working, so let me do a task.delay, or you can even actually do a thread.sleep, but ideally you can actually do whatever, right? Just for the sake of understanding, let me just put a delay of, say, here 20,000. Okay, and yeah, so we are good, right? So I want to show you how this whole thing looks like, and then we'll just copy this here. Okay, so first we have to get the URL and then append our path /home/test there, and then you should be able to get that response. Okay, so let's quickly check this out. I'm running it. Okay, so I have got this as my URL. Okay, now going to your Chrome browser. Oh, I should have opened it and kept it. Okay, so /home/test. You see, we have got hello everyone, right? So that's how you actually use this whole the WireMock setup, right? So it's really simple. Anyone can actually expose this the port number, and then you can configure with what kind of request you want, what kind of response you want, and stuff, right? So now let's take it up one notch higher, and then let's try to see how we can actually configure this with a JSON response, right? So that's basically what everyone uses, right? So yeah. So let me just uncomment this previous one, and then let's create one for your content type as JSON, right? So let me just copy this and paste it here again. Okay, and Control K, Control U, Control K, Control C, sorry. And here, instead of text.plain, I'll say something like application/JSON. Okay, and then over here we need to use a different method, okay, which I will just show you. You have to use a method called with body as JSON. Okay, so let me just bring this down. Okay, so now what we have to do here is, in this with body as JSON, basically we have to write an anonymous object, and you have to define your anonymous object whatever similar to your array. Okay, so what we'll do is, once you write your anonymous object here, it will actually internally, it will just serialize that, so it will just convert that into your C# objects, right? So let's see how this is being done, right? So we say something like for example, new. So we have, since I told you, we're creating an anonymous object here. Okay, new, say, class is equal to say engineering, and you can name the other as designation equal to something like developer. I don't know, something random. Okay, and so if you see this, so basically we are writing an anonymous object here, and then we are just passing it. So let me just see why there are errors here. Okay, I think since this is a keyword, we cannot actually use this, right? So we'll say something like branch. Okay, and branch is engineering, designation is developer. So I think we have got a basic JSON here. So let's just run this and show you how we can do this, right? So let me just run this and get the port number. Okay, the port number is 8219. So I've kept a thread sleep of 20 seconds. So 8219, right? So if I write over here at 8219, see, branch as engineering, designation as developer, right? So this is how basically you would create your JSON here, and you can actually put the response as JSON, right? So there's a lot of things that you can do with it. It's an amazing tool, right? And you can play around with it, and you can quickly virtualize your service endpoint and just expose it, right? So I hope you like the video. Please like, subscribe, and share, and let me know in the comments if there's something else that you want to create. In the upcoming videos, we'll see if we can we'll try to cover rest of the important C# automation topics. Yeah, thank you.